3, 2, 1. We are live. Hello, Mike. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Caio. Hey, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. In this free series, we are covering the basics of how to build iOS apps with Swift, TDD, and a clean and modular architecture. You'll learn strategies you can use in your journey to become a black belt senior iOS developer. And that is to achieve technical excellence and be part of the highest paid developers in the world. So subscribe to the channel and don't miss out on new episodes. All right. Everything good? Awesome. Hello, everyone.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. In this episode, you will learn how to create an independent domain module to separate core domain logic from app-specific details and also like third-party frameworks and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you can run tests in the domain module without the simulator to speed up development. And these free live sessions are only possible because of the students of the Essential Developer Academy. So thank you very much for your support throughout the years.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So this is how this session is going to work. We'll go fast and we'll have a quick Q&A session at the end. So let's start. All right. So if you want your apps to have a clean and flexible architecture, you need to separate concerns and create independent layers as needed. This way, you can easily and quickly adapt to changes because you can make changes to specific layers without affecting others. Make sense?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And including switching frameworks as well, right?
Absolutely. Like we replaced Swift UI with, UIKit with Swift UI.
Swift UI, yeah.
Or you can replace core data with Realm, or you can replace URL session with, I don't know, Moya, Alamo Fire, whatever you want to use.
Absolutely.
But it's important to understand that a clean architecture is not a template.
Okay, yes.
You achieve a clean architecture by following a set of guidelines and principles applied together in unison.
Exactly. All at the same time. And if you follow a template, you will probably end up with less layers and abstractions that you need.
Or more often, you will end up with more layers and more abstractions than you need.
Right.
A violation of the YAGNI principle.
Yep.
YAGNI is short for you aren't gonna need it.
Exactly.
You waste time and resources following a template and creating abstractions you won't ever need.
Yeah, I mean, unless the template you follow was created by you and your team, right, to solve your goals and needs. Yeah, otherwise it's probably going to deliver suboptimal results.
Absolutely.
Plain and simple. Yep.
You can create templates that will solve your problem at your company with your team. But that's you going to create it to solve your own goals and needs.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you probably deliver suboptimal results. The code base can become more complicated just for the sake of following someone else's template.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And it may solve their problem, but does it solve yours? Usually not. That's why a clean architecture is not a template. It's a set of guidelines and principles applied together in unison.
Mm-hmm.
So you achieve simple solutions for your goals and your needs. So you can deliver better solutions, saving time and effort in the short and long term, right? Because a clean architecture will help you maintain this code base in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. And as you can see, I mean, we're not following a template here, right? We created these layers as needed.
Absolutely.
Right.
Have you ever seen a template like this? Probably not. So we created the presentation layer, for example, to decouple the UI from the domain layer here and the domain from the UI as well. So if the UI needs some formatted string, I don't need to do this logic in the question model, for example, right? We can do it, all the translation to what the UI needs in a clean place here in the presentation layer. And so on. So the presentation layer is also agnostic of UI frameworks, right?
Yes.
So we have the Swift UI implementation and also the UI Kit implementation using exactly the same presentation. And we can also create here a watchOS UI implementation, or I don't know, scene kit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever you want, We only have to replace the UI without affecting other modules. And the engine here, for example, is agnostic of any other module. It doesn't point to any other layer, right?
Yes.
This means it doesn't depend on any platform either, because it doesn't depend on the application. Because the iOS application lives here, right?
Yes.
In the main module.
Exactly.
The quiz app. But the engine doesn't depend on it, or the scoring doesn't depend on it. So they are agnostic of platform as well. The presentation layer as well doesn't depend on a specific platform. The UI does, because the UI framework is specific for a platform. But Swift UI runs in multiple platforms as well. But the engine here, it doesn't depend, absolutely does not depend on any specific platform. This means it can be used on macOS, iOS, watchOS, Linux, Windows, anywhere you can run, compile your Swift code too. In the same way here, the scoring layer only depends on the engine so far because of this question data model. So it's also platform independent. We can also move this question outside the engine because the engine doesn't depend on this question. This is a data model, so it could probably go along with the domain layer here. Make sense? So this is something I'm going to do today. But to be able to fully benefit from these cross-platform layers, we have to extract them to its own modules, their own modules.
Right. Okay.
But won't creating modules make my code base harder to maintain?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, not really, right? Because there are simple and complex ways of doing it. And yeah, you don't have to choose the complex ones,
Yeah, to start with, simple solutions won't be hard. For more advanced setups, when required, then you may need some more elaborate solutions. But you can automate most of the work when it's needed as well. Make sense?
Yep, that's it.
And what is the other benefit of separating those platform agnostic modules or layers from an application target?
Right. We're not gonna have to run our tests in a simulator, so we get faster tests.
That's another benefit.
Development process is faster. Absolutely, that's a big
one. Right now we are keeping all these layers here in the same target, right? In the same module, in the application module, which makes it easier to start with. But when we run the tests for the scoring test, for example, we need to run it in a simulator because it's within an application target. And it can be much slower.
Yes.
Also, if we keep everything in the same module here, nothing stops us from start referencing types of other layers and breaking modularity, right? Nothing stops us from suddenly start using a view controller here.
Yep,
exactly. Like the results view controller. See, there's no physical separation. Don't even need to import anything different. It's accessible. So it requires a lot of discipline. You want to keep your code modular if they are all in the same target module, right? All right, so what is the simplest way to start with with creating a separate module, but not overcomplicating our code base maintenance. Or we can keep all the code in a single project, as we've been doing so far. Right? This is the simplest way. But again, it requires discipline. Now, if you want to separate it, you can still keep all the code here, but in a different target.
Yes.
Just like we have an application target here, we can create a new target. In the same quiz app project.
Yeah.
But why not in the quiz engine? We could also put it here in the quiz engine. Well, the quiz engine is a generic module, right? That can be used for any quiz app, any quiz logic. Ideally, it shouldn't be coupled with game-specific logic, such as the scoring and the data models. Make sense? That's why we can create it here in the quiz app. How do we create a new target? There's a button right here. Add target.
Yeah.
Now we can choose iOS, macOS, watchOS, tvOS, and so on. It can be a static library. Where is the static library? Library can be a framework as well. So I prefer frameworks because I find it easier to manage and link within Xcode.
Yeah.
Now, should it be iOS or a macOS framework?
Yeah. So, I mean, since the core game domain logic is agnostic of platforms, it could be any, right? But
it doesn't depend on any platform.
Exactly. But I think we can go with macOS, so we can run the test without the simulator.
Okay. So macOS framework it is. And this is the basic quiz game, as we've been calling it so far. So let's call it basic quiz. No, domain.
Okay.
To tests, of course, language Swift. That's it. Boom, there it is. Now we have two new targets. The framework target and a test bundle target.
Fantastic.
For our tests. Also, we got two new folders here. The tests and for the production code. We also got a scheme, a new scheme, automatically here. For building, archiving, testing, and so on. And as you can see, you can only select Mac because we created it as a Mac OS framework. But the logic within this framework is platform independent. So we can configure it. We can configure the target to run on more platforms. So we can go to build settings. Here you see supported platforms. Right now it's Mac OS. But we can add here iPhone OS and also iPhone simulator. Because they have different architectures, different platforms. Boom. All right. Now if you look at the scheme, you can select iPhone devices, you can select the simulator or the Mac.
Awesome.
Let's build. Run the tests. Boom. It's working. Of course, we have no code yet. Just an empty test case here. But everything is wired correctly.
Exactly.
All right. Also, we can make it a static library by changing the Mac-O type. By default, a framework is a dynamic library. But you can make it a static library if it makes sense for a use case. For us here, it's only going to contain code. It's not going to contain any resources like storyboards, core data, modules, or anything fancy here. We don't need to load these with the dynamic linker at runtime. We can just statically link the code of the domain into our application at compile time. So for this use case, so far static library works pretty well. Now we can add this basic quiz domain as a dependency, because if you look at the diagram here, the quiz app, the main module depends on the scoring module layer. So we need to import now in the quiz app target, we can import the basic quiz domain framework as a dependency.
Okay.
And here we can either embed this dependency or not embed this dependency. Remember,
Right.
you embed dynamic frameworks because it needs to be loaded at runtime, but you do not embed static frameworks or libraries because they are linked at compile time.
Exactly.
So do not embed because our basic quiz domain is a static framework. Make sense?
That's it.
So now the quiz app is linked with our domain dependency, but our domain is not linked or doesn't depend on any other external layer, module, framework, or any other module. Make sense? Now we can move production files and test files for the scoring into our new module. Just drag and drop. Let's also remove this empty test case that comes by default. Boom, there it is. It's important also to check if the target membership updated correctly. Sometimes it doesn't. The files here should be selected in the correct target membership, basic quiz domain, and the tests in the basic quiz domain tests. It all seems correct. Fantastic. Let's try to build. Let's see if we have any issues. Look at that. We do have an issue.
Okay.
So far here, if you look at the diagram, our types depend on this question type that lives in the engine module. And the engine module is defined in another target. So we would have to add the quiz engine as a dependency here. But we don't want it. As we said, the question model, data model, is part of the domain. It shouldn't be in the engine because the engine doesn't even use it. It was just here temporarily until we created our domain module. Okay. So now it's time to move it here.
Yep.
And that's easy. Since no one uses this question inside the quiz engine, we can also just drag and drop it here. But look at that. It kept the file here. When you're moving files on Nextcode from one project to the other, you need to manually delete it here. Remove reference. Not move it to trash because it actually moved it in the file system, just didn't remove the reference from Xcode. Boom. All right. Let's see if we can build now the domain. Build failed. Let's check. All right. Instead of importing the quiz app, now we need to import the quiz basic
score. Yeah.
Quiz domain.
Yep.
The next one is we don't need the quiz engine here.
Okay.
The same here. We need a quiz app.
Okay.
Right. Now the basic quiz domain layer module has all its dependencies within this new target. So we moved now this question into the scoring here. All right. Now let's see if we can still build the quiz engine because we removed a file from there.
Right.
Let's run. Tests are passing. That's it, because no types here even reference the question. It was just there temporarily. All right. The quiz engine is fine. The new quiz domain is also fine. You can run the tests on Mac, or you can also run the tests on the iPhone 12 simulator or on the device. What about the quiz app?
Okay.
The quiz app depends on a bunch of types here.
Right.
They now live in a separate module. So we need to import this new module everywhere one of those types are referenced.
Exactly. So we're going to have some changes to do there. Get some build errors most probably.
That's
But
it.
it should be simple to fix.
Let's see. The compiler is going to tell us what to update. All right. Instead of quiz engine, the question now lives in the domain.
Yes.
Next. Same here. Next. Okay, we need to import the domain here. Import the domain.
Yeah, and this is not a quiz engine.question anymore. This is, yeah.
Right. Next.
Okay, we need the both.
This. The presenter, which is the presentation layer here, only depends on the domain,
right?
Not on the engine anymore. It only depends on the engine because of the question, but that's gone now. And here, what else do we need here?
What's the problem?
Oh, the basic score, which is defined in the domain, needs to be public. So when you have modules, now clients can only access public types of the module.
Yes.
So we need to expose it here, and then we can hide internal types in the module, which is another benefit of having modules, hiding implementation details.
Absolutely.
All right. That's it. Now the test side, same thing. Basic quiz domain. And here, basic quiz domain. Basic quiz domain. So you link another module with the import statement to get access to the types.
Okay.
Last one. Boom. Succeeded.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Yeah, you can also add the configuration, the CI scheme to include the domain module.
All right, so we have a CI scheme where we run all the tests we build and run all the tests for all the modules. So here we can just select Manage Schemes, select the CI scheme. And here we can select all the tests in the Test tab, all the test targets we want to run on CI. Can add a new one. Basic quiz domain tests. If you want to run the domain tests as well as part of the CI process for this application, you can run them all together. All right, so now we have separated the core game domain logic into a new cross-platform module. This is how it looks now. The engine is completely agnostic, decoupled, independent of any other layer. The domain is also agnostic and decoupled, independent from any other layer. Just the presentation depends on the domain layer, and the UI depends on the presentation.
Awesome.
That's it. And the applications will compose the layers as needed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in the future, you can also separate this framework into a new project or a local package. A local package or a new project in the same repository. This is often called a monorepo setup.
Right.
You have one repository with all your projects, which makes the, how do you say that, the linking and the maintenance of your modules much easier. Or when needed, you can also separate all your modules into different repositories.
Yes.
This way you can reuse it across apps and projects that live in different repositories.
Yeah, and you'd have a remote package you can manage with the Swift Package Manager, Carthage, CocoaPods, tool like that.
Yeah, then you get a more advanced setup, and then you're gonna need some kind of package manager to keep the versions, up to date. All right, so have a look at your code bases and look for areas that could benefit from modules. Any duplicate code across modules and apps in your code bases, wasting time building and running unrelated tests for every tiny small change, running tests on the simulator when it's not needed, and so on. Those are important decisions you need to make in your projects if you want to become a black belt iOS developer and be one of the highest paid developers in the world. And we hope this session helps you develop, test, maintain your code bases. And there's so much more we're going to cover in this series. So if you enjoyed this session, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's have a quick Q&A now.
Yeah, let me start with Ricky saying, nice improvement. Before, I wouldn't have thought to move the question type from the engine, but after your change, it seems like the obvious move. Yes, and that's why it's very important to be aware and question every single time, like your design, and just make sure you follow good rules, good principles.
Yeah, deciding where you're going to move those data models will depend on your needs, on your code base, on your goals. There's no final template that's going to help you solve all the problems. If you want to get the most optimal results, you're going to tailor the solutions to your needs. All right. What if domain models need to be created from JSON API responses? The codable protocol has to be used. Where to put the extension for that? I recommend you don't do it in the domain because I would like the domain to be decoupled from external dependencies, including backend APIs. Because backend APIs may change, and if it changes, you're going to have to change your domain layer and affect all other modules. So what I do is I create separate modules that represent the responses you get from the API, and those modules will conform to the codable. Then you translate those modules into your domain. What else? Mango, these diagrams are so important. Absolutely. It helps you think the high level decisions, about your code base.
Enrique,
Paris, why don't you use a dependency manager? We will use one if necessary. Why would you use like CocoaPods, or why would you use like Carthage or something like that when you can have a simpler setup at this point?
For sure.
For more advanced setups, when you start separating things in repositories, absolutely, we're going to use a dependency manager like SPM or CocoaPods or Carthage or whatever makes sense.
Yeah, Enrique asks where can I find the example? That's going to be in our GitHub page of this repository.
The link is in the description of the video.
Yeah, exactly.
All the source code is there. How would you start to decouple highly coupled project? From the root, going upwards towards smaller classes, or from smaller classes to the root? It depends. I wouldn't stop development to start decoupling application. I would start doing things as I need to change a feature or implement a feature, or
gradually.
I need to touch some area of the code base. Gradually, I would start doing it as part of the day-to-day work. I wouldn't stop to do it because you're not going to convince your boss to stop and refactor everything. So do a little by little as you need to change something. Always make a little bit more clean, a little bit more decoupled, and so on, little by little. If this is a team effort, it's not just you. If you work in a team, like everyone needs to be aligned that this is the goal from now on. And every time we change code, we're going to make it more modular. Every change should make the code base better. And little by little, you get there. Depending on the size of the code base, it may take some time. It doesn't matter. Just do little by little and you get there. How test targets get affected with many modules? What do you mean?
Yeah.
You have one test target per module, per target. Is there something specific you want to know about it? What software do you use to make these software design diagrams? Classic question. We write those diagrams here. It's a browser too, draw.io. It's a website. It's free. Okay, what else? Is there anything we should be careful of with regard to target membership when working with multiple modules?
Yeah, check it. Otherwise, you're gonna get build errors.
Yeah, just make sure the files are within the correct target membership. Also, is there something specific here? That's a very broad question.
Yeah.
Many things can go wrong. Even without targets. Anton. If we have a data layer which operates a class person, just for example, and a view layer which operates some class, where should I place person if I want to separate data and view? It depends. It depends on your goals and your needs of your code base. If this person represents some kind of like presentable data, like this presentable answer here, maybe it can be in a presentation layer. If it's decoupled, if you want it to be decoupled from UI frameworks, you can place it into another target, another module, and share it. If you want to share this presentation logic with others, then you can move to another target. Otherwise, you're keeping the same project. If it represents a domain concept, maybe it should be in the domain, and so on.
Amber asks, is there any practical use case application of open access specifier when working in modules? Yeah, it's about subclassing.
Yeah, if you want a subclass, it needs to be open.
If you
want to allow subclasses, yes.
Exactly. Of these APIs to subclass.
For example, view controllers in UIKit, they are heavily based on inheritance. So it needs to be an open class. If you expect your clients to inherit from your class.
Exactly. It depends on.
If you want them to do so, you make it open.
Yeah, exactly.
How to share data models between layers? If they are in separate targets or separate modules, other modules, they can all depend on the shared model layer. But be careful, maybe you don't want to couple all the other modules with the same layers. What is the architecture using this quiz app? Again, we're not using a template. We're just implementing what we need. Do you want a name? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the UPB architecture.
It doesn't have a name. Again, I mean, it's what Caio said in the beginning of the episode, talking about like how clean architecture is not a template. It's just very valuable principles and guidelines all applied in unison, and this is what you end up with. It doesn't have to have a name and be a templated solution.
Yeah, but here we have views. We have some view models here. We also have this presentable data to decouple the presentation logic from the UI framework. So you can say that here we have MVP. Here is the core.
Right.
And here's just a reusable engine for controlling the flow of a quiz game. What else? Does the connection of modules require tests, integration tests? Yes, you may need some integration tests to make sure that they are interacting correctly between them.
Yeah.
But the majority of tests, there will be unit tests in the modules. Then you write just a few integration tests if needed. How would you compare between a domain module-based architecture versus Redux-based architecture? They are the same. It's about modularity, separating things into modules, separation of concerns. Now, how you combine things together, then it might differ if you're using Redux or something else. But even with Redux, you want to have your domain module decoupled from the frameworks. If you're using a Redux framework, you don't want your domain modules inheriting from any Redux classes. It's just a different way of combining them. But the idea is also to separate your domain from frameworks and application-specific details. All right.
Fantastic.
And if you want to take your dev skills to the next level and support our work, we are running a free crash course in January 2021. Visit academy.essentialdeveloper.com and sign up now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.